CRs, debts, deficits, appropriations, what does it all mean and how does it affect you? We'll talk about it right after this.
Hi, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Here's your host, Representative Rick Crawford.
Hey, thanks for joining us for Tune-In. I'm your host, Rick Crawford, and we are going to talk about a pretty important topic today, CRs, debt, deficit, appropriations process, and how that all impacts you at home. Let me start off by saying that the House voted for a continuing resolution this week. I voted against it. I'm going to tell you why. But first I want to talk about what some of the Hill speak language and jargon that you hear and really how that impacts you. One of the terms you hear a lot is deficit. And deficit basically in the simplest terms is it's your outputs minus your inputs in any given year. So that is when you spend more than you bring in the course of a given year, that's a deficit. You take how much the government spends in a year and subtract that from our revenues, that is to say our taxes. And so then we hear the term debt. Now, obviously, we've got 19 trillion and counting in debt. Our debt is the accumulation of the years of irresponsible deficit spending and the addition of the accumulation, rather, of deficit year after year. So I want to make sure you understand that debt and deficit are not the same things, but they are interrelated in that our national debt is the sum total of our year after year deficits that we've seen. And it's particularly relevant to talk about that in the context of this administration, which this administration has actually racked up more debt through deficit spending than all of the previous administrations before it combined. So that's another important footnote in history. And then we'll talk about the appropriations process. Now, you may remember that a month or so back, maybe a couple of months ago, we talked to our friend and colleague in the delegation, Congressman Womack, who sits on the Appropriations Committee. He gave us a pretty good breakdown of appropriations and how that impacts us. So I don't want to get into that, but that's basically cutting up the spending pie for the money that we have in a given year. So, and that's really what the Congress is supposed to do. That is our constitutional mandate, that we actually spend your taxpayer dollars ideally in a responsible way. So let me go back to the continuing resolution. You hear this term CR bandied about a lot on the news and on talk radio. What a continuing resolution is when the annual appropriations process breaks down, it's a last-ditch effort to keep the government open and keep funding at the same levels as previous years. So continuing resolution. So we're continuing that level of spending. Under a CR, I'm going to go ahead and use the jargon CR since we know what that is, continuing resolution. Under a CR, Congress is basically robbed of its ability on how to decide to spend our very limited resources, which are your tax dollars. That includes keeping those resources out of the hands of organizations under investigation for trafficking in fetal tissue, and that is to say aborted baby parts. Okay, so let's be honest about what we're talking about here. So I voted against budgets. I continue to do that. You know that I vote against budgets. I've voted against other continuing resolutions in the past because they really don't have any impact on how the money gets spent or how much money gets spent. So I have demonstrated that I fundamentally disagree with this process. I'm a big advocate, as you know, of a balanced budget amendment or a spending limitation amendment, and we could talk about the difference there. Maybe that's a topic for another time. But that prevents us from getting into these 11th hour potential government shutdown showdowns. So that's basically what took place this week in the House. So the government's not going to shut down, at least for now, through the continuing resolution that was passed by about 277 votes on that CR. Again, it wasn't about the Planned Parenthood issue as much as it is about the process. I will say that I do support defunding Planned Parenthood. However, we have passed some measures on the House floor to do just that. I don't know if the Senate will take those up, or if they do, if they have the votes to pass them. That remains to be seen. Keep in mind there's only 54 Republican senators that may have a predisposition to supporting those initiatives. I know of at least 50 that are pro-life and would support it, but not all. So again, we have an issue there with respect to what we can get done in the House and how the Senate responds to that. But that is the process. I'd like to hear from you at some point. We encourage you to tweet us at Tune-In AR1. You can always find us on Facebook. You can look at our website, and we certainly want to hear from you. We've been getting more and more viewers of the Tune-In shows, and we hope that continues. We want to be as informative to you as we can be, and just kind of pull back the curtain and let you know what's going on here in Washington. That's the topic this week. The CR, it did pass the House, and we have averted a government shutdown for now, and we will keep you posted as things continue to develop. Thanks for joining us for Tune In. We'll see you next time.